Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today is Stephen A. Smith going to be our president in 2028? What? So, if you guys are watching this video, you're probably familiar with the fact that Stephen A. Smith has been getting asked about potentially running for president in 2028 in several different interviews that he has done recently. Now, Stephen A. Smith isn't the first public figure that likes to engage in politics that we have ever seen get asked the question, hey, would you ever run for president one day? But the difference between Stephen A. Smith and someone like, let's say, a Mark Cuban is is the kind of guy that says, hey, I don't have any plans to run. I think he even said last year I would never run. And then basically that's where the story ends, puts out the fire. That's it. Well, Stephen A. Smith kind of does a similar thing, but then recently, because he's been asked about it in the past, but recently he has started adding a caveat. Well, if I think I would have a chance at winning the presidency, I would certainly consider it. I would run if insert blank caveat. And he's done this several different times. And before I show you all of the clips of Stephen A. Smith kind of flirting with the idea of running for president, I will put in this caveat here for you guys, because I don't know if we're going to get a different audience for this type of show than we are used to. We are strictly a sports talk show. I'm going to try and make this video as apolitical as possible. We only talk about sports on this show, and I don't know much about politics, but I know a lot about Stephen A. Smith. We talk about a lot about sports media personalities on the show, and that's why we are talking about Stephen A. Smith on this show. And the last thing I will say is I think there's probably a 0.0001% chance that Stephen A. Smith would run for president one day. But I do think the reason he keeps flirting with the idea and not putting out the fire like we were talking about earlier is because he has an ulterior motive of why he keeps dancing around this idea of him potentially running for president one day. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, how did we get here today? How did we get here where Stephen A. Smith is flirting with the idea and being asked about the idea of him running for president one day? Well, as we said earlier, he has been asked in the past, hey, would you ever consider about running for public office? But shortly after the election in November, I don't know if it's the day after the election, I don't know if it's the same week, Stephen A. Smith went on The View, who I've never watched The View. Leave it up to that. They're kind of like a Democratic liberal type of show, if I get their vibe correctly, because they make a joke in the middle of this clip I'm going to show you. But one of the women on that show asked Stephen A. Smith, would you ever consider running for public office one day? And he had this to say.
You've been asked, I hear, about running for political office in the future. And some people have said that they could see you running for president. Would you do that? You think you qualify to run for president? I mean, the bar's pretty low anyway.
I do not.
Can you rephrase that?
I mean, I just think that the bar is really low because Trump really had no political experience and went from 0 to 100, right? He didn't start the city council and stuff like that. So the bar is low. Anyone can run.
I have said this on many occasions. The answer would be hell no, because I like my life. I'm living a pretty good life. But I must confess, I wish I could debate some of these guys. I'd love to be on a debate stage going up against these guys with the presidency on the line.
We will arrange that.
And I'm half joking, but I kind of mean it. I mean, I have no desire to be a congressional figure or a senator, but if you came to me and you told me I had a legitimate shot to win the presidency of the United States of America, I would definitely consider it. But here's the problem.
So you want to break through the line?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes, absolutely. For that, yes, because others have. Okay, including Democrats, by the way. Yeah. I mean, they broke the line. What's wrong with me doing it? But I would be an independent because I don't like either side, and I'm not going to be bought and paid for. I'm going to do what I believe is in the best.
Yeah, and then he talks about, hey, I do what's best in the interest for the American people, and then kind of talks about how he hates both sides and blah, blah, blah. So there you have it there. Kind of what I was saying earlier. Stephen A. Smith's like, no, I really wouldn't do it, but if I had a chance to win, I would do it. So that was in November. And then a few weeks ago, a poll came out from, I believe the company is McLaughlin and Associates came out with this poll. And Stephen A. Smith was surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, on that poll of running for president. As you can see here, this tweet from Front Office Sports, Stephen A. Smith is emerging as a potential 2028 Democratic candidate for president. The ESPN commentator is polling at 2% in a recent survey, right behind 3% for vice presidential candidate and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. So that's kind of notable because Tim Walz was almost very close to the presidency, and he's at 3%. Stephen A. obviously at 2% behind him. Now, you might be saying at home right now, hey, Stephen A. Smith said, in that View video that we just showed you, hey, he would only run if he would consider running for, he would only run for president if he thought that he could potentially win. Well, 2%, that's pretty low. If you are only polling at 2%, what's even the point of running unless you want a spot in the cabinet? Well, guys, once upon a time, our current president was polling at, as I'll go ahead and show you on screen for you guys that might have forgot, Donald Trump, our current president, was once upon a time polling at 1%, 13th on this list here. And then he obviously, put together a campaign, did perform very well in debates and ended up becoming the Republican nominee and ended up running for president. So after this poll came out, Stephen A. Smith has talked about, or excuse me, I think there was this poll that came out early February, and I also believe there was another poll that came out kind of like late January. I think that poll might have had him at 4%, if my memory is correct. But after these polls started coming out, Stephen A. Smith was addressing the idea of running for president on his own show, not First Take, but the Stephen A. Smith Show. And he had this to say. This is February 1st.
I doubt I'll ever run. It's not me. I live a pretty good life, and I don't want to ruin it by getting involved in politics. But I got to tell y'all something. The Democratic Party looks so pathetic after this election. I might entertain running. I just might change my mind one day. I doubt it, but I might. Because how much would it take to beat y'all? And Trump can't run again. He's done.
Okay, so you could say that about that clip there. Hey, he is talking about the Democrats, and he's talking about how they have no leadership in their party. And again, it's not my opinion. I'm talking about what he is saying on the show. Again, trying to be apolitical. And basically, that is the state that your party is in right now, that people actually think that I could be a presidential candidate for you guys. Well, Stephen A. Smith, again, a few days later on his own show, talks about running for president again on his own show. This is what he had to say just a few days later about running for president.
And you came to me and you said to me, as the American people, that you wanted me to be your nominee for the presidency of the United States of America. I have to confess to you, it is something I would consider. I didn't say I'd do it. I didn't say I'd want to do it. Me personally speaking, whether it's from a day.
Again, he says there, I would consider it. And I know he probably does a bunch of caveats after that, but we don't need to listen to that. And then Stephen A. Smith over Super Bowl week did an interview with CNBC Sports, and he talked about it again on CNBC Sports. And he also did other interviews talking about it too, but I'm just going to go ahead and show you a few quotes from that. I'm not going to read this whole article from you guys here, but the title of it is ESPN host Stephen A. Smith says he would be U.S. president as long as he doesn't have to campaign. That's basically kind of the gist of this. He said, I wouldn't mind being in office, as you can see up here. And then he later says, I'm not one of those dudes that's great at shaking hands and kissing babies per se and currying favor with politicians and donors. I'm not a beggar. That's not who I am, Stephen A. Smith told CNBC. If you tell me that I could catapult to the White House and I could be in position to affect millions upon millions of lives, not in just America, but all over the world, yeah, that's something that I would entertain, he said. So again, we're talking about this. He's talked about it on The View. He's talked about it on his own show multiple times. He's talked about it in interviews with CNBC. He did an interview with Front Office Sports where he talked about it again. He keeps talking about it. He keeps putting caveats in it. Probably not, but maybe. Again, he's not putting out the fire. So that begs the question, why? Why does Stephen A. Smith keep teasing at the idea that he may run for president one day or may consider running for president one day? And I have a few different ideas as to why. One thing I thought about was he likes attention because he's obviously getting a lot of attention from this. He is getting asked to do a bunch of different shows. This maybe opens up more doors for him. And Stephen A. Smith is not the type of person that like he doesn't have to go on Sean Hannity. He doesn't have to go on a bunch of different podcasts or do interviews with CNBC or Front Office Sports or whatever. He doesn't have to do things like that. But I think he likes doing it. I think he likes talking about himself. I think part of that, I mean, everyone does. Everyone kind of likes talking about themselves, right? And I also think, too, he probably also maybe could like the idea that some people out there think that he is presidential, that some people out there think that he is capable of, quote unquote, fixing all of the problems that we have in our country or possibly even around the world. And that's something that is probably a very intoxicating feeling if people think that highly of you. So it could be something like that. Another theory that I had, which I think I've easily disproven or don't believe in, is maybe the fact that he's teasing it on his show multiple times. Maybe he's just getting absolutely bonkers numbers from that. Now, I obviously don't know like what the numbers on his podcast do for audio listens, but I was looking through his YouTube channel and I was looking at the specific videos where he was flirting about talking for president, and where he was kind of clickbait people like, would Stephen A. run for president one day? Would I be a candidate for the Democratic nominee for president one day? And those are actually some of his worst performing videos. Like one of them, I think, had 12,000 views that came out a few weeks ago. One, I think, had like 22,000. Now, obviously, for me, that would be like an insane amount of views to have on my channel for one video. But for Stephen A. Smith, this is a guy that's had, that has regularly over 500,000 views on some of his videos. I think generally a lot of them are 100,000 views. So those are some of his worst performing videos. So it can't be some sort of like, hey, I talk about this and we get like a crazy number of views. And that obviously, fattens my wallet. So it's not that. The biggest reason why I think he is doing this is Stephen A. Smith, his contract with ESPN expires this year. I think it's probably, if I'm guessing, it's probably sometime in the summertime, probably anywhere from like May to July is probably when it expires. Maybe August even, I don't know. And Stephen A. Smith has not signed a contract extension with ESPN. And this is something that Stephen A. Smith has been kind of talking about, and there's been a lot of reporting about the specific dollar amount that Stephen A. Smith would be receiving from ESPN if he were to re-sign there. And Stephen A. Smith has, and we did a video about this, I think about a year ago at this point. And basically, Stephen A. Smith said, hey, I want the bag and I want to be the highest paid personality at ESPN. And that leads us to this ESPN exclusive. Stephen A. Smith tells Front Office Sports that a new deal with ESPN is coming very, very soon. Smith is believed to be seeking an estimated 5-year, $100 million extension that would make him the highest paid employee at the company. Keep in mind, guys, if you can see on the bottom of your screen, that says February 5th on this report here from Front Office Sports. Keep in mind, too, the first video that we showed you guys of Stephen A. Smith talking about on his show, talking about it February 1st, talking about on his show. I might consider it now. I might consider running for president. Interesting. And then this will be the last thing that I will show you guys on this video here today. Stephen A. Smith did an interview on Super Bowl week talking about his contract with ESPN, and this is what he had to say about that. He seemed pretty positive that he was close to getting a deal done. But again, it's still not official yet, by the way.
I have a very, very close relationship with Jimmy Pitaro. who's been incredible to me, and Bob Iger as well, of course. And knowing when you have those kind of relationships, you don't buy those, and to have the kind of relationship that I have with them, you know, everything that I want to do, you got to make sure all of that is there and it's in the language, the devil's in the details, because from a numbers perspective, we've agreed months ago, we like literally months ago. It's not about the money at this point because the money was agreed to back in October. The issue is all the things that I just finished talking to you about and what I want to do, working out that language because lawyers get involved and all of that other stuff. But I work at a great place. We're a worldwide leader. We're number one. And I've got great bosses. I've got great colleagues and friends. I love working there. And I'm anticipating that, hopefully we'll reach a deal very, very soon. And I'll march forward with ESPN for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. So again, he seems pretty confident there a few weeks after all of this stuff happened, that he's going to get a deal done very, very soon. But again, do we know? Do we know if the money's all there? What is all this stuff about his certain things that he wants in his contract, certain things that they want him to do or he wants to do with this contract, the certain leeway he may have? I don't know. I don't know all the contract negotiations are going on, but we know that he's been kind of publicly talking about this, negotiating with this for well over a year now. And you're saying that the money's been agreed on for a while now, and it's taken 2-3 months. Again, I don't know about giant contract negotiations that well, like Stephen A. Smith, but maybe this is a thing where Stephen A. Smith is kind of saying to ESPN, hey, don't pull any funny business on me. Don't pull any funny business on me, Disney. I have options. I think that is what he is saying here. I have options. I can go do my own thing. I can go to another company. I can go and I'll be fine without you guys. I'll be fine without ESPN. I can build my own empire if I want to. Other people have. I can do that too. Don't pull any funny business on me with this contract. I think that could be a big part of this. And again, like I said at the beginning, I think there's an incredibly small chance he would run for president. I think he's probably going to sign this contract in the next few months or so, maybe even weeks or so. And we'll have Stephen A. Smith on our TV shows and different networks, different podcasts for the foreseeable future. And again, is this a thing that ESPN and Disney are going to look at and be like, oh my God, Stephen A. Smith's going to be running for president. We got to sign him now. We got to lock him up. He might leave. Is it something that they're like, having like an emergency meeting about of him saying he's, considering running for president? No, I don't think it's anything like that. But again, I think this is a kind of a message to ESPN. Hey, don't pull any funny business with this contract. I know you're paying me a lot of money, but I have other options and I will keep them open. So again, that's kind of my thoughts on this. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Do you think he's actually considering it? Do you think he wants attention? Do you think this is, some sort of like public kind of, inching closer towards a contract negotiation? Those are kind of my theories. Love to hear your guys' thoughts, but that's going to do it for this video here today. If you like this video, please hit like. Please hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. It's the number one way you can help support this show. It costs you absolutely $0. Again, this is probably the most political, if you could say this is political. I guess it was kind of inherently, but that we will ever get on this show. So do not expect this that often. We like to talk about sports. We like to talk about football, basketball, baseball, occasionally sports media stories like we just talked about here. And if you like that, feel free to check out our channel. You might find some other videos that you might like on this channel. So thank you very much for watching. We'll talk to you next time.